Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. This is a conversation today about mobile journalism. Of course, when we talk about mobile journalism, you're talking about news of the future. Whether it's digital, whether it's broadcast, I think this is going to be an important technology going forward. Let me introduce myself. My name is Rhonda Brown. I'm one of the regional co-directors for the RTDNA and have invited this panel to join us today. So I'm going to give you really quick introductions. Sue Newhook is our moderator today. She teaches video mobile journalism at the University of King's College in Halifax, which is where I'm from as well. Former reporter and producer with CBC. She's developed a real interest and passion in mojo, as we call it, and is instructing her students on the technology so when they come to newsrooms like mine, they know what they're doing. Also here today, Peter Akman. He's a senior correspondent right now with W5, maybe not doing as much mojo these days as he was, but for the last 18 years, he worked as a video journalist in several cities in our country. He used mojo at some of the biggest events in the world, including the Olympic Games, and has got lots of learning to share with us. Mark Chambers has been with CBC Radio Canada since 2001. He's worked as a reporter, VJ, live remote producer, and assignment editor. He is now with the Field Operations Department of CBC, where they're testing out new technology and rolling out a mobile journalism lab for Radio Canada. And Sarah Leavitt is here with CBC Montreal. She's a working daily journalist doing video and mobile out in the field. She's been with CBC Montreal for 7 years, worked in print before that, but is almost exclusively mobile journalism now. So she's got some great field learnings for us. So take it away.
Good afternoon. I hope lunch was terrific. Just before we get started, I have a question and we have a little show and tell for you. How many people are using mobile journalism in their news operations right now? Are you generally happy with it? How many people aren't exactly sure what? How many people aren't exactly sure or still working around definitions of what mojo would be? Yes, okay. So basically, I guess we could say we have some slightly arched definitions, but the short version is that it's journalism, video, and audio and text that you create with your phone, not just consumed on it. Is that fair for a jumping off point? We can get into that a bit more. And we've all brought kits for people to have a look at, ranging from the utter bare bones of mine at the far right. That's my I'm not traveling with checked luggage kit. Through what Mark, Sarah, and Peter all use in the field for professional broadcast. And we also want to show you a little bit of the work that Sarah and Peter have done. Is there anything you want to set up in terms of before we look at that short video of your work?
Yeah, well, I just chose what I sent in. I chose situations where it would have been hard to have a big, heavy camera. So it's kind of perfect for a small iPhone.
Okay, and Peter?
For mine, I was sent to the Olympics to cover the games with that roller bag, and for the record, I don't check that either. So it just goes in the overhead compartment. And I filed for the extent of the Olympic Games, 280 live hits and stories every day, both to DNS and national, out of that kit. So this is just one example of one of the stories, and for the record, it was minus 30 degrees that day, and these kits work great in that weather.
Okay, so can we just play that about a minute of video there?
Made in the shade, rolled into Saint-Hubert Airport today as part of the Flying Legends of Victory Tour. For the past 48 hours, truck after truck of gravel has been carted in. It's all to build the temporary dike to hold the water back. But after riding an ATV to Flex House, he couldn't just walk in. Instead, an SQ boat escorts us to his front door.
This unification expert says he's encouraged by these recent diplomatic advances. This is the most progress we've seen in a decade, says Ki Young-sung. But we'll have to see what happens after the Olympics are over.
Yeah.
Kim Hyun hopes both the new mascots and South Korea's athletes will surpass the standard set in 1988.
Well, most South Koreans doubt the Pyeongchang Games will leave a legacy like that of Seoul. They have no doubt that once again these Olympics will introduce them to the rest of the world. Peter Akman, CTV News, Seoul.
Okay, so close enough, good enough for prime time. So let's talk a little bit about the daily life of mobile journalism. I'd like to talk a little bit about how your individual operations organize mobile work and what a day in your life, for example, Sarah, is like. Just give us an idea of how you work.
Yeah, so a standard day for me starts, well, when I wake up and I check what's in the news that day, or what I want to pitch, or what is assigned to me. In our shop, we're lucky because we have the resources for cameramen to accompany journalists, but we also have people who are VJs or mobile journalists. So assignments could be assigned in that way, knowing, okay, maybe this is a little hard by yourself, or this is perfect for a mobile journalist, and meaning I often get those assignments.
What counts as perfect?
Ones that I can go out by myself, don't necessarily need to be back in the shop to edit, can file on the field. Maybe it's less movement. So example, I wouldn't go to City Hall where there's scrums. They try not to make me have to do scrums because that can be difficult. So when I get my assignment, then I figure out what tools I want to use, whether it's perfectly just the phone, or I need my full kit, or I also want to add a DSLR, GoPro, gimbal, anything like that. Then I go and I shoot, and whether I can do it on the field, I try to not go back to the office. That's the best part of being a mobile journalist, is you're not tethered to the office. You don't have to go and feed all that back and then work on the computer. So work outside when it's nice out, and I package it and I send it in, and then that's it.
And you file across platforms with that, right?
Yeah.
Over the course of the day?
Yeah, so I'm filing mainly for TV, but I do TV, radio, and web, and sometimes current affair radio, and it's perfect for this type of thing because you can take your video and rip the audio and then package the audio and send that in, and it works for radio.
Okay, and Peter, how's that for you?
My workflow is a little different. Mine's a sort of which house is on fire type situation. There's a terrorist attack in Paris. We can't get a camera there to meet me, and so for the first 14 hours I'm alone. I go in, I ditch half the kit, and I go and gather, pumping stuff out as fast as I can. As soon as Canada's awake, I start doing live hits also there. It's a 3-light setup in the kit. I can do a 3-camera shoot. I have 2 iPhones and a DSLR that I sometimes bring. So depending on the scope of it, in Korea, I covered the Governor General going to the Blue House to meet the Prime Minister of South Korea. Did that with an iPhone kit. The rest of the pool of cameramen were very upset when they saw this little thing roll in, especially when I was able to go live directly from it, and they weren't. I didn't have a Degero. I had the Degero app, and it works great for just pumping stuff out right back into the system at CTV, and they can put it up as soon as the tape turn time has passed.
Right.
So I edit, I shoot, I do rants, I do lives, and it's sort of a case-by-case basis.
And you're working exclusively in television, right? Pretty much?
Yeah, so I do hits for local and national, but we also have radio stations that are linked. So usually I send in the video not ripped, and they split it how they want to split it.
Okay. And Mark, talk a bit about your experience and how you can bring that to developing some of the field kits that you're working in the field operation.
Well, that's right. So we're on the verge of
trying to launch our first Mojo team for Radio-Canada Ontario, and I'm working with them to develop that. And I guess the philosophy behind it is, I think Peter and Sarah alluding to it, but it has to be proximity. By virtue of the fact that it's an iPhone and it just has a very small lens, you have to get close to the news. You have to be on the ground. You have to be there where it's happening. I think the nuance that I would bring is that the way Radio-Canada, anyway, regionally is going, is that they really want to have the Mojo have a much more social media and web mandate, much more than a multi-platform mandate. And we can talk about that later, but really the emphasis, that the direction we're taking is be there, and by being there, you have a great deal of credibility in telling the story. I mean, it's the ideal of what a reporter is supposed to be. You witness something, and you are able to very quickly, because of the iPhone or because of the whichever smartphone you're using, you're able to ship it back to the station almost instantaneously, either through Dejero Live, through app, or through Facebook Live, or whatever. That turnaround time is now very, very quick, as long as you have the bandwidth.
And you referred to this a little bit when you were talking about, Zoom. We tell our students, Zoom with your feet, right? You don't want to be Zooming with a smartphone. You just physically have to get in there. And what are some of the, maybe you can all talk a bit about the pros and the cons of mobile journalism practice.
Well,
Technical,
the wind is the
logistical,
con.
whatever you like.
The wind is the biggest con. There's a shimmer, a digital shimmer, that if everyone takes out your phone right now, which I'm sure you all have them in your hands anyway, you turn it to the video function, you hold it square, like you'd hold it if you're shooting someone's birthday, and then you just tap the edge of your phone. You watch the shimmer that goes across that screen. It kills you every time. It is the worst. It's the worst function because it's the stabilizing function. You can actually turn off the stabilizer and it'll make it a lot easier. And that came through 1,000 on cameras that I was shooting in a windy day. And so the wind is the worst thing. Managers are also a bad thing too, by the way.
How so?
Well, because the understanding of what this technology is, sometimes we're limited to becoming shooters. We talked about this briefly, is that you go out there and yes, you can pump back that material like that, but I'm a journalist, I'm a television journalist, I'm a video journalist, which means I should be part of what I'm producing. And you turn journalists into cameramen, basically. And that, I think, is the risk of where we're going, because people see these very nicely edited videos with subtitles at the bottom and no reporter presence, no reflective value in that. And to me, that's the risk of digital first is great, but why not a digital first show and tell, walk and talk, rant, be on the ground, show what you're, talk to someone, that type of thing. And
Can you pitch those?
Oh, constantly, yeah. Because I don't want to become a shooter. I'm not a shooter. I have an editorial position, I have an editorial mind, and I want to share that.
I don't necessarily agree in that the journalist is not present, even if the journalist, I feel the journalist is present even if the journalist isn't on camera, and that goes through how you package your piece, the writing that goes into it, how you put it all together. But
that's your voice. Your voice means you're present. No, I don't mean you have to be on camera, but if you're just sending video back, then you just turn into a cameraman, is what I'm saying.
I'd say for you mentioned wind. Cold is also very frustrating if you don't have the tools. So many times in the freezing cold Montreal weather, at the beginning when I started doing this, my phone would die in literally 30 seconds. And it would actually flash saying it's too hot because it doesn't understand too cold. And then you'd power it back on and the battery would be totally drained. Since experiencing that several times, I now have a USB charged hand warmer that I wrap on it, and it works fine. I'd say for the pros, for me at least, is that these are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. I come from a print and radio current affairs background when I first started. And one of the biggest issues that I had transferring over to TV was just how different the average person acts in front of a camera. As soon as that camera's there, you know, they get nervous or they start acting, or, you know, and as a local reporter telling local stories that are sometimes seem very small, but I feel like that's what everybody wants to hear. Having my iPhone and convincing someone to talk to me and just saying, I'm just gonna shoot it on this, it's not live, you have these every day, it calms them down, and it brings more realism, the way you want it to be represented. The other thing about it is, in that case of the flooding, that was from last week or 2 weeks ago, shooters weren't allowing the shooters to go with residents. They had accompanied people going with firefighters, but you weren't allowed to go with residents. And in that case, I was speaking with one of the elderly people who were out of their homes because of the flooding. This was in Saint-Marc-sur-le-Lac, where, if you didn't hear about it, basically a dike was breached and they had 5 minutes to get out, and his house is completely flooded. So they were accompanying residents back to their homes. And the only reason I could go was because I had no equipment with me. That was shot just with my phone, no microphone, no rig, nothing, just with my phone, and they allowed me to go. And then, of course, when I came back is when I grabbed my kit and I interviewed the guy so that it was actually, I got some good sound, because that can be problematic. But that just goes to show you how much easier access is with just your iPhone.
And anything to add to pros and cons on that score, Mark?
I would just say that I can't emphasize enough the intimacy that is created by someone who comes to an interview. Like, I don't know if you've had sessions with interviewers, but usually when you do an interview with someone, you're trying to create a bubble, right? You're trying to connect with someone. You're trying to make them forget that there's a camera, and forget that there's lights, or forget that there's all this production going on, and you want them to just focus on you. Having them, the iPhone is so discreet and so ubiquitous that people are quite more able to open up, and they're able to have those exchanges that perhaps you have to work harder for. Not impossible with TV, but you have to work harder at it in television, whereas if you're just there, hey, it's just me and my iPhone, let's talk, you know? That's an easier way of creating an interview. As far as the cons, I think for me, who often has to help and support a station that covers pretty much all of Ontario, there is a bit of a digital divide that can happen with Mojos, because the Mojo is very dependent on bandwidth. That's your lifeblood. That's how you feed your stories. That's how some softwares, editing softwares, update to a cloud. You can't update to a cloud if you don't have a lot of bandwidth. You can't do a live hit if you don't have a lot of bandwidth. So in cities, that's fine. But if you're going to Musquodoboit Harbor, or Dubreuilville, there's only one cell phone tower in Dubreuilville, and it's a Rogers tower. And if you have a Bell SIM card in your phone, you're not going to feed anything. So it's subtle, but bandwidth is actually going to be a big thing. And it's also very hopeful, because when we start going to 5G, wow, that might open up a lot of possibilities as to what it is that we can file with our iPhones.
Apart from the technical challenges of Mojo adoption in newsrooms, what other kinds of issues have you all seen or experienced? Challenges to why there's a sense that there's some pushback about using this, right? Whether it's about quality or workload or jurisdictional questions, or just talk a little bit about what you've seen or heard about that, can you?
So I think that if the earlier, when I was doing this earlier, so I've been doing this about 2 years now, and at the beginning, there's so much that can go wrong, and there's so much, we're using third-party apps, the settings, everything like that. So at the beginning, I was lucky because I felt like in our office, they were aware that this was a beginning and we were trying, but the further we go in, people will always say, can you have a cameraman? And I say, well, I don't need a cameraman. And they say, why? I was like, oh, mobile. And there are some people that are like, mobile? And you prove them wrong by showing them your work. And when they see the work and they see either that they can't tell the difference between the two or the access that you got because of that, it changes minds. I think there's always going to be people, no matter what office you work in, that are always going to say cameraman is better because they have the training, they have the equipment, but they're always going to do that, so you have to prove them wrong.
Honestly, I think having a cameraman is better. I mean, to be a journalist is, but why can't my cameraman be carrying a Mojo kit, right? And so many of the senior national shooters at CTV also have a DSLR kit, they have a Mophie, they have a Mojo
Mophie.
kit.
Tell the folks about Mophie.
We'll get, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
But the whole idea is that having an extra person there is a benefit, but shrinking economies and budgets, and we don't have the money to send a second team into this breaking news event. And so my regular line is, if you're sending him and his shooter and producer, send me. I will take story 2. I will do the live hits. And they're like, well, we don't have a shooter, or we don't have. That's it. That's all it. It doesn't have 17 Pelican cases going into the bottom of the airplane. It doesn't have a carnet that you got to make sure it's updated. And so just to get managers understanding and senior producers understanding that it is of the same quality. But I will gladly also have a shooter there with me if I can move in and out of situations that are dangerous, if I need a scrum last minute when I didn't know, right? So there's a balance, but why not also equip your shooters who all have iPhone 7 or 8s or 10s with a mic that plugs into this, so that the two of us can walk into a place and do what we do as well. So it's not limited just to the journalists. It's so cost effective, it's downright cheap. And so equipping everyone to take the stigma away, because truly there is stigma.
Why?
Well,
Because of quality. Because for years we saw terrible blue video from VJs. We saw bad layouts. We saw, sun behind the head, so their faces completely, you can't see their faces, bad audio, you name it. And so the stigma has been attached to this.
It's the phone's fault.
No, it's the training fault. So, and so because of that, we break that stigma and we show that the quality off of this, and shooting 4K on this, why not?
And I think that just from an editorial point of view is that news managers we're just at the very beginning of Mojos. I mean, well, not really. I mean, we've done it for a few years, but it's really starting to catch on. I think news managers are just looking at this as VJ 2.0, and I think that would be a mistake. I think the reason that quality is perhaps not as what we would want is that poor Sarah has to maybe file a radio piece for noon, has to file footage for the news network, and then has to file a TV story. Well, it's just one person with an iPhone, and you're treating this person as though they're a 3-person crew. And somewhere when you're signing a Mojo, you have to ask, well, what is the one thing that I really want to get out of this person? Where do I want this person to have an impact? What medium, what channel do we want to really make an impact with what this person is doing? And I think, whatever choice you decide to make, whether it be TV or whether it decide to be, we really want this person to have a social media presence, we want them to do a Facebook Live, or whether it be like, file for radio. They can do all of that, but they can't do it all at once. And hence,
Try.
and hence the problem. Hence the problem. If they're rushed in their shooting, they're not watching their audio. They're not paying attention. So that's sort of the overloading a Mojo, as it was with the problems with the VJs. That's what you have to be very careful for as news managers, I would say.
And when you're dealing with the public, how do they respond? Are they, I mean, you talked a little bit about how it helps to put individual people at ease, but do they, as some of my students sometimes think that do they think that a smartphone is less credible than $60,000 worth of gear?
I get a lot of, oh, CBC cuts, eh? But, and sometimes they're like, oh, you're a journalist? I mean, it doesn't help that I look pretty young and, you know, but then they see the quality of what comes out of it, and I think that they're often impressed. But the majority of the time, I will get people saying, yes, I will do an interview. Streeters, which I hate, but I do sometimes, are so much easier than when I had the camera. You know, not only technically, you know, I'd have to like set up the camera tripod and move and focus, and it always took time, and you already have people who are reticent to speak to you, this random question that they're getting. But with the iPhone, it's just like boom, 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 get it. And I think people are like, oh, that's really cool, and I have lots of questions about my kit. So, you know, there's both sides of it, but I think both sides have the positive to it.
Yeah, Peter, you find the same thing?
Yeah, I find people are interested. It's everybody is shooting video on their phones. Everyone's a mojo now. You know, you look at Twitter, that's full of angry mojos, and so it's when I crack open the kit and they want to see how I'm getting audio so that maybe they can go and do that at a birthday party and hear the person's speech. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing, but the reality is when you set it up and the quality of what you can get is second to none. I'll tell you that the first 9 stories that I filed from Korea, all on iPhone, all cut on iPhone, all filed from iPhone. Nobody in our plant knew it was an iPhone shot story, and it was going either leading or back to back with traditionally shot news stories, and you couldn't tell the difference even on my 60-inch television because I recorded all the shows, and once I got back, I checked through them just to see for myself what they look like in full HD on a 60-inch TV, and you know, if they don't know, then it's the perfect story. It's perfectly shot.
A lot of outlets don't have in-house production apps, so mojos often rely on third-party apps, and it's part of the reason so many of us shoot on iPhones. What apps do you guys use, and what would you recommend? What would you never touch?
I'm not telling you.
Ah, come on,
No.
you use Filmic Pro,
Secret.
right?
Yeah,
I know
no,
that
don't tell
part.
them.
That's
No.
no secret. But
So
how do you find them?
for the shooting, I use Filmic Pro. It's about $30, I think.
Outrageous.
Yeah, $30. And it's better than the native camera because you monitor sound, you can monitor light, you can monitor the focus, you can do rack focus, you can, and there's a whole,
iris.
yeah, so you can do a whole bunch of different settings, which can also be dangerous. You know, you can film in 4K in Filmic?
Yep.
Yes. I do in 1080p because that's what our system uses. So that's for filming, and then for editing, I use LumaFusion, which is about $40 and is incredible. It's just has, at CBC we use Avid News Cutter. It has everything, and it's even easier to use. LumaFusion is, that is. And I cut it together either on my phone or an iPad. I prefer the iPad because it's bigger. And then push that to the system.
I mean, the only thing I would add to that is what's important about apps is think about who your mojos are going to call when they need help. And so your support people, also, it's good that everyone be on the same page as far as the apps go. Filmic Pro is a pretty basic app, and everyone's on the same page. But like, for example, LumaFusion, Sarah's the only person that uses LumaFusion. So if you get into trouble, I can't help you. So right now, actually, we're in the process of figuring out what the best app would be for the phone. It may be LumaFusion, but we're also testing out Adobe Rush, and there's other apps out there. But regardless which apps, I think what's important is a small number and that everyone's on the same page and using the same apps, so that those people, when they're in the field and they can't file their story, that you can help them.
Well, Sarah, you can ask any CTV, Mojo reporter, because we're all on LumaFusion, and it is an easy app. It's very simple. The best part of a LumaFusion app is that if you have Google products, which CBC does, you're all on Gmail type thing. So if you take and bump up a video or any file into Google Drive, you can go into that drop-down menu, open your Google Drive from LumaFusion and pull it immediately in. So when I was cutting stuff in Korea, any stocks I needed, I could pull in off Gateway or Gateway stock system that's there and drop it into Google Drive and then pull it into LumaFusion and then go the opposite direction as well. And so it makes it very easy.
Okay, so we need to get to the Q&A because we are running a little late.
I'll just quickly say that for the radio side of things, we use Hindenburg, and I've been experimenting with Ferrite because Ferrite actually you have more than one track, whereas Hindenburg you can't, so you can mix. And sometimes I actually end up editing in LumaFusion and then pulling it as an audio file, just because I'm more comfortable using LumaFusion. And then Lucy Live Lite is really great on the field for lives into radio because it just sounds like you're almost in the studio. It's way better than on the phone. Those are the apps I use for radio.
Okay, so just before we go to questions, and if you have any, please feel free to queue them up. Real quick, advice for people who want to start or up their mojo game in their newsroom, what would you tell them?
Shoot it like this. For God's sakes, shoot it like this. I don't care what Instagram tells you. You can cut it square. Don't shoot it like this, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah, also, yes, the thing's supposed to be at the top, so even if you're left-handed, I'm
Button
left-handed.
on the right.
Don't shoot it like that. Don't shoot it like this. Shoot it like this, please. You give us all a bad name.
Be open-minded, and that means allow the people in your office to learn how to use this and to experiment, and that can be hard in newsrooms where there's not a lot of staff and you need people to file every day. Be aware that in some cases they're not going to file because they're learning how to do this, and you have to be patient and allow them to get that experience, and really just embrace it. You have to embrace it because this is the way we're going. So if you don't, you're going to be left behind.
Any other, go ahead.
I would just say that it's very important that the person that you're choosing to become a mojo, that you select them very carefully, because it's not for everyone. It's certainly not as easy as it looks. I mean, everyone can record something with their phone, but not all of it can be aired. You know, you can't always expect that it's going to be good. So there's a certain amount of photographic eye that people have to have. There's a certain amount of visual storytelling background that they have to have. You have to be very careful about who it is that you decide is going to be a mojo. Otherwise, you're not necessarily going to be happy with the results.
And that's something.
Train them,
yeah,
please.
that's what you're going to say.
Train them. I mean, that's the bottom line of all of this to anything we all do is that we've cut back on training, we've limited training, but we expect the same quality. It doesn't work that way. And so to do what we do to a level that does not jump out and hit you in the face that it's different on television, you need training. I've shot for many years from SP to SX to EX1s to 150s and 170s, I mean, all the way through. That's training. And to get to here, fine, it's a lot simpler than, you know, the white balance and the white cards and the rest of the stuff that comes with it, but it comes with training.
Mm-hmm. Okay, questions? Back there, oh, Liz, you're up there, and then back to the other corner.
On the training, I've got a couple of questions, but I'll make them really fast and I'll ask them all at once. So on the training, how much training? If you're really talking about somebody who's coming in and trying to learn this for the first time. And you also mentioned story selection, and some stories are good. You have to send a camera with them, some you don't. Can you give me an idea of what those are? That's, I think Sarah, you mentioned that. And what do you say to the people coming into the business or being, let's say, encouraged, not forced, but encouraged that you have to do it all? What suffers, or how do you get started, or how do you change that that perception of the people who have always worked in the traditional method, and they're afraid of doing this, of joining this new generation?
So the first one was about training. It depends on what you want them to do, right? If you want them to file to Instagram with just video and a clip from someone, not a lot of training. I mean, composition of shot, basically, know your parameters. Don't put them right justified or fully left justified, depending on where they're looking. You don't want to cross the axis, basic things like that. But if you want them to file stories, then you have to train them like a journalist, because that's what they are. And so full training, lighting training, audio training, how to, in the wintertime, it's dark at 4 o'clock. So that means you're 6 o'clock, you need lights. And so do you want to just be a black head on a black, or a head on a black jacket, with the black background? So if not, then you have to teach about, a backlight and a key light and, and give them lights. So it comes with the level of what you expect from them for training. But we shouldn't stop training journalists or video journalists or just because they're now carrying an iPhone, I think is the bottom line to all that.
Yeah, with absolute newbies, we always start with, don't do something you need to Zoom for, like don't go to a hockey game, and avoid low light. Those are the big things. And as you say, starting out with social is a great confidence builder, right? And there are a lot of third-party apps that will help you with your editing. Did you want to say
As for which assignments, I think at the very beginning, it has to be a one-stop shop assignment for the people who are just learning. That means basically all your interviews are in the same spot. There isn't a time limit, things like that to ease into it. You're not going to send them. I did a story last week that was like very minor. It was about teaching kids how to ride safely in the city. Very, not national story, but very difficult because they were doing this 5-kilometer route and they were constantly moving, and I'm one person, how am I going to do this? What I ended up doing was getting a GoPro, strapping it to the bike, getting a gimbal with my phone. Actually, I was not the example of bike safety, because it was a child's bike on top of it, so I was, anyway.
You needed a second
I wish
camera
someone
for
had
that.
filmed me filming them, but ended up following one person. But it was a hard shoot, and I had time to think about it before and get the tools I needed. So you don't want to, you want to choose an assignment at the very beginning at least. But I also think that the assignments have changed. So when I started as a VJ, it was often don't send the VJ to a protest that's moving, don't send the VJ to a scrum, but as I became a mobile journalist, sometimes I am the one that goes to a protest because I can move with all this. So I think it's just being flexible and hearing from the journalists as well what they feel they're comfortable with.
And I think your last question was regarding the more traditional journalists, how to get them on board with this idea. I think the key is to perhaps start small. They can gather a clip on their phone. Maybe point them in the direction. I mean, you guys have had presenters, I think in the first session, showing how important social media is becoming, how important. So maybe convince them that what they're gathering, and if that is going onto social media or being gathered for the web, that is having an impact. There are people looking at that. It's not going into the ether and not being, so if there has to be a logical justification for that. I would like to comment about training and just add to what Peter and Sarah have said. It's not just how much training you give, it's who you're training. Like Radio-Canada's program we're putting together, we're training a producer who will be working as an assignment producer. We're training 2 journalists who were VJs, and we're training 2 camera operators. So they're all going to be working in this thing we call the Labo Numérique, which is a laboratory, and we're going to give them 1 week of training, and for 7 weeks after that, or 6 weeks after that, they'll be working as Mojos and filing stories gradually with more increasing difficulty. So that's the kind of investment that newsroom is willing to make in this technology.
And the equipment. Obviously, the equipment.
Question in the back, and maybe you could pass the brick over to Susan after that.
Yeah, sure. So my question is, obviously when we're working with phones and you're wanting to use it to collect better audio and stuff like that, you're having to augment it a lot, plug different things in, and you have a whole rig that's going on. How do you make sure that there aren't failures in those connections? Because some of the Mojo work that I've done, when I look at my audio later, I'm like, wait, it was taking audio from the phone rather than my mic, and it's really frustrating. And because it's not all one system, you're like kind of MacGyvering a thing together. So many ways it can go wrong.
It's still true to this day that I will notice during an interview that, oh shit, it's not picking up my mic. And yes, it's super frustrating. The important thing is to always be monitoring. You can tell right away almost what, one of the things with Filmic Pro, for example, is if you're filming and then your connection, like you wiggle it or you pull it out and put it back in, it will unsync the voices. So all along the way, I've learned these lessons, and it's been like devastating at times to learn this, or to go in post-prod and have to like bring them back together. But it's about the equipment that you use and being aware of where things can go wrong so that you can either adjust immediately or restart if you can. But you can't always. And sometimes sound, just go native if you have to, if that's the thing that you need. You need that audio and it's the only time it's gonna happen and you're fiddling with this, just unplug it, and it's not the best, but at least you have it.
Having a base level single adapter in shotgun microphone as a go-to base level audio tool is important. If you look at all the three rigs, the similarity between them is a shotgun with a single cable with an adapter into the port. That way you're not 10 degrees of separations, two adapters, and all these. Don't go wireless until you're fully comfortable with that. Even for live hits, I'll go hard, an adapter to a cable to a 3-pin up to my lapel, 20 feet of cable in front of me. Fine, it's not the most mobile, but it's solid, it works, and it doesn't crap out. One time though, I actually started keeping styrofoam cups in my kit, not because I like styrofoam, but because you cut the bottom off, you stick your iPhone in it, and it works as a unidirectional mic off the bottom mic off your phone. Because in the cold, all my mics just for some reason did not want to work, neither did the port, and so you find a way.
And keeping in mind the technology is improving. Like, if you look at my rig, it is designed for Mojos. It's actually, you have manufacturers now who are building these kits for Mojos. And so we talked about failure points. My shotgun mic plugs right into the lightning port. There's no cables, so you're trying to limit the failure points. And of course testing, like test it. And by God, when you actually need it, it might actually work.
Susan?
More of a comment. I think one of the ways to approach this Mojo idea is that there really isn't a traditional worker anymore in this business. I shoot iPhone all the time. I also work with a camera person most of the time. It is enhancing our product enormously to be able to collect audio by myself, to do radio, to be able to enhance the video that a camera operator is taking. I'll give you a good example at Roxham Road, where the people are coming across to Quebec. My camera operator shot one scene, and I shot the other with the iPhone, and we married them together. It couldn't have been a better solution, because we had both the RCMP and the people talking to each other. So I think if we approach that, it maybe is part of the way that we can get across some, difficulties. I know camera operators feel the iPhone is never anywhere near the right quality for the best quality, particularly for the Zoom function and things like that. So I think if we look at it to equip our journalists to be more mobile, more of it mobile, I think that's maybe the right approach, because I do worry that we don't have as much time to be journalists, to be thinking about the story, to be connecting with our interviewee when we have so many responsibilities, and we haven't even talked about all the platforms. I mean, it is a fact that we have so many platforms, we all need to be more mobile. That's just a fact. So I think it's a
Yeah, it doesn't
very
help
good way.
being distracted by all of that while someone's trying to tell you their intimate story of a death in the family or something like that, and you're looking at your equipment. It's the same thing with when I'm a VJ, it's the same thing. You know, when you eliminate that extra person, you have a lot more to think about.
But I mean, even W5, we just did an unscheduled interview with an MP, and the producer I was working with, let's get a third camera cutaway, right? And why not? I mean, the days of producers standing there and, really enjoying the work the journalist is doing are gone. And the journalist standing there enjoying the work the cameraman is doing are gone. Why not shoot the camera shooting something? Because then you have an amazing cutaway and you have angles, and you'll pick up things that, rather than tapping them on the shoulder saying, can you stop shooting that and shoot this? You do it, right? But you'd have to know how to do it.
Okay, we need to wrap up shortly. We have one more question here and then in the back, so please, let's keep it tight.
It's a really quick question. So in that sharing of knowledge, so you have the experience, you know what you're doing, but you are working with teams who have various degrees of knowledge of how mobile journalism works. If you could pick one person in the newsroom that you wanted to shadow you for a day, who would it be? Like, who really needs to know what it's like to be in the field doing what you're doing?
Boy, that's a loaded.
Yeah, that's
It's
hard.
Saturday, it's just between us.
It's not just a question for you, Sarah. This is not a loaded question.
That's hard. It would either, well, I'm going to cheat a little. It'll be the assignment people. We have 2, AM and PM. But also, for me, because it's mostly for TV, it would be the TV lineup editor, who's the one that's asking what, touches base with me, what they want for the TV show, what kind of form that's going to take, and also helping me when I push something back to the system, they're setting it up. But I think for them to understand what I'm doing out in the field would be incredibly helpful, so that sometimes demands can be really, really, really high and they don't realize how much we're doing. So I would have to say TV lineup editor.
Last question in the back.
Is there any online training for this? I work remotely, it'd be perfect for where I work. So are there courses that I could register for through colleges, universities that teach me this stuff? Or is this stuff online anywhere where you can learn to be a mojo?
There's definitely online resources everywhere. Like just following certain people on Twitter. When I first started, so Europe has fully embraced this, Ireland, basically the UK. There's a lot of people there that I follow and who are extremely helpful, people that work with RTE, BBC, and they're very transparent online, and they post their resources. There's a handbook that was recently published. I can give you more specifics later, but there's definitely the mojo world is very, right now at least, is very open and sharing.
And a little plug for the website, the Facebook group that I'm an admin on. It's called #MojoFestival, and it comes out of the Irish conference that Sarah was just talking about, which is now called Mojo Festival. It was started by RTE 5 years ago, and it's remarkably generous, and you could follow people there. A number of professional trainers from all over the world are on this, and they argue about what kind of mics to use, how to deal with glitches. It's just bottomless pit of nerdy goodness, am I right? And so check out hashtag Mojo Festival on Facebook. And
It's starting to
One of
creep in.
mine.
It is starting to creep in. A course that I came in as a speaker here in the Toronto area, they're embracing that. I mean, they still have the EX1 or the small Sony cameras, but as an aside, a secondary camera, there is that. I mean, it's amazing how easy it is to do a 2-camera shoot now. And I know at the local level, there often isn't that thinking or even the time, but it's, you know, like I have 2 iPhones, and they're quick to set up and quick to throw one behind the other, and all of a sudden I can use all of my questions along with it, and the cut to put them together is so quick. You airdrop
And
it.
it looks nice.
And it looks nice, but you can airdrop it. I mean, airdrop, if you don't know what airdrop is, you are so far behind, but you need to know what airdrop is, because it costs you nothing. You can do it with you don't need a signal. You just need to be close to another iPhone. So if somebody has great iPhone video, you can do that. But you know, it's amazing what you can do to, you know, return the quality to journalism, television journalism, to video journalism with these things. You just have to be interested. Really, you have to be. I mean, the reason we all became journalists is because we like to learn, and we're creatures who wonder about how this works and what's going on. Attach that same sense of wonder and you know, hunger for knowledge to this, and it's not that difficult.
it can be as easy or as complicated as you want to make it, pretty much, you know. And just one more plug again, but the Facebook page is, you'll also find a reference to the Mojo Festival itself, and that's a international conference that's held in Galway the first weekend in June. So we can always tell you more about that. But thank you so much. I know we went a little bit over, but thanks to the panel. You guys are great. Come see our toys.
Yeah, come and check out the rigs. So with that, we're going to close this conference. So I wanted to say thank